you supposed to actually start designing characters? Experienced character designers seem to pull incredible ideas out of thin air. How do they even do that? How did they even think of these? It seems like magic, doesn't it? Is it possible to develop this ability for yourself, and how do you get better at it? Well, don't worry, because it's definitely not magic. It's something far more boring than you might expect. Some of you might know how to improve your drawing skills, but you might not know how you're supposed to improve your design skills. So I'll explain what exercises I did to improve my character design work and how I managed to go from this to this. Before we begin, let's do a quick recap. What exactly is character design? Isn't it just making up pretty outfits? Well, designing appealing outfits is part of it, but it's not the entire story. Although, character design is about visual communication. It's about how much you can tell about a character just by looking at them. It's telling a story with no words. Now, how do we begin? Do we start by conjuring up all of our creativity to think of the most original, super duper, unique idea that's like never ever been done before? That's not necessarily true. Many people think uniqueness is the most important trait of a design, but just because an idea is unique, it doesn't mean it's good. For instance, someone once shared an idea for a character that had living toenails that moved as snakes that they could use as weapons. That's certainly unique, but is it good? Maybe. I'll let you decide. Instead of that, let's start with a short and unoriginal prompt. Perhaps some kind of angelic knight. Pretty boring, right? You've seen this done a million times. In fact, this is something that I've done before, 3 years ago. This is one of my first ever character designs. I'm going to try redesigning it to see how much my character design skills have leveled up. Instead of worrying so much about uniqueness, we really should be focusing on the execution. How well it tells a story. Even a boring idea like this, competently executed, can turn into an amazing character design. Let's start by looking at our prompt, starting with the word knight. In order to visually communicate the idea of a knight, we have to know what they look like. Then once we have this information, we can use the elements that we need to communicate what we want about the character. So how do we get this information? Obviously, by researching. But not just any research. How you do the research is super important. We'll start by looking up knight on Google Images. Right away, one obvious thing that all these knights have in common is that they're all wearing armor of some kind. Great, that's a lot of reference images. Let's try designing. This is how I did my research in the past, but I found that when I tried to design armor of my own, I kept running into two problems. Problem one, sometimes my armor would just look way too close to the reference images. It just felt like I was taking elements from existing references and putting them together. Problem two, in order to avoid the first problem, I would try to not look so hard at the reference images and invent my own armor, but it just looked bad. I didn't really understand why, but it didn't really look like armor at all. I think the problem was that by just looking at pictures, I was gaining only a superficial understanding of how armor worked. In order to design something that looks plausible, you need deeper knowledge. Even if you're planning on doing more fantastical designs, understanding how things work in real life is key to making believable character designs. And notice that I said plausible and believable, not realistic. We have to believe that they could be real, not that they actually exist. Your designs could be as fantastical as these or as grounded as these. You just need people to look at them and think, yeah, this could actually work. So how exactly do you pull that off? You'll need to do some more in-depth research. I'll show you how I did it. To help with this, I'm going to be using Milanote, the sponsor of this video. Milanote is a note-taking tool you can use to organize information for your projects. Personally, I tend to get really lost in long Word documents, so I really like it. Of course, you can use any note-taking app you like, but I think Milanote has a lot of convenient features that makes the research process easier and more painless. If you want to follow along with my process, you can get started with Milanote for free with the link down in the description. Anyway, let's begin our research with European medieval armor. There's tons of different armor around the world, but fantasy draws a lot of inspiration from medieval armor, so it's a great starting point. To start off, we can break down a suit of armor into individual components. The most important thing to learn about each of these pieces is how it works. Each piece of armor attaches a certain way and is used for a particular purpose. So we're going to need more than just pictures for this. You're actually going to want to take some notes. I often find that museum websites are great sources of information for armor, so I really like adding links to museum pages on my boards. Milanote's pretty easy to use. You can just drag in text snippets and images, but I also like using the Milanote web clipper extension for Chrome because it also includes the sources of the images and text that I add. I find that pretty handy because going back to check the source can be really useful. It's also important to do studies when you have time as well. Remember, as visual artists, there's nothing better than drawing something and deconstructing it to really understand how something works. And once you're done with that study, you could just add it to your board. Anyway, we've done a ton of work, so are we done here? Can we finally begin our character design? Is there anything else we need to know? Wait, do you remember what the theme was? It was Angelic Night. We'll need to learn a little bit more about how angels are portrayed to communicate the angelic aspect of the design. But it's going to be a bit different from armor because no one's ever taken a photograph of an angel. But angels have been the subjects of paintings for a very long time. So what we can do is research historical depictions of angels and the symbols typically associated with them. But besides just the angels themselves, there's something else related to angels that I think will be very useful for this design. Angels are associated with religion and therefore churches. And churches are often richly ornamented with beautiful carvings. And in particular, I'm interested in the Baroque period of architecture. Just look at these beautiful and elegant shapes. Maybe I can use some of these in my designs. In particular, there's a lot of beautiful and elegant scroll work, delicate swooping spiral shapes. We can use these shapes to help strengthen the angelic theme of our design. And of course, angels have wings. The first time I did an Angelic Night design, I based the wings off a secretary bird. I just think they look cool, which is a valid reason to do something in a character design.
I just think they're neat.
So I'll be doing the same thing this time around. Perhaps at this point you'll be thinking, this is way too much work for a single character design. Am I really expected to do this every single time I design a character? That's way too much. But here's the thing. Once you do this research and this practice, you don't throw it away once you're done with that design. You store all of this information in your visual library for later. If you like designing fantasy characters, you'll find that you often have to draw armor, and all of that research you just did, that's going to come in really handy. Expanding your visual library is one way you can improve your character design skill, so none of this effort actually goes to waste. By the way, don't forget that the best thing you can do to get better at something is to actually practice it. So how do you practice character design? By designing characters, of course. With this information you just researched, try turning them into quick character designs as well. The designs don't have to be clean or colored. It just needs to be clean enough that you understand what the design is supposed to be. But once in a while, it's good to spend a bit more time on a detailed design, so let's go back to the Angelic Night for now. One last thing I'd like to cover before actually beginning to design our character. If you look at our board so far, it looks like they're mostly filled with photographs or older paintings. But what about existing character designs? Angelic Night is not a very original idea, so it's been done tons of times before. We can definitely draw inspiration from these as well. But remember to be careful when using other artists' works. There's a risk of accidentally plagiarizing a portion of their work, even if you're not doing it on purpose. To help prevent this, instead of using these as a reference, I create a mood board. I collect some artwork that captures the feeling of the character I want to create. To avoid the problem of accidental plagiarism, I try to keep the images fairly small on the board, so I can't quite make out the individual elements, but I can capture the overall mood. In any case, this research stuff looks like a lot, so don't worry, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. I personally spread it over a few days. Sometimes I have my best ideas while I'm out and about, so it's useful to jot down quick notes so I don't forget them. Fortunately, Milanote has a mobile app where you can access all your notes in a mobile readable format, and you can take down notes and file them away later. Thanks again to Milanote for sponsoring this video. So now that we finally have all the information that we need, we can finally start designing. We gathered a ton of references for learning, but now that we're actually drawing, we don't actually have to be looking at too many of them at once. In fact, having too much reference can make your character design a bit unfocused. So I make a smaller board with fewer references that I actually look at while I'm creating my character design. When it comes to character design, research is incredibly important, but it's not the only step. There are also other important steps when it comes to creating and refining designs, but maybe we'll save that for another video. For now, we'll keep it simple. We can start by doing thumbnails, which are loose sketches to help you quickly generate ideas for your character. Remember that thumbnails don't have to look good. They're just there for you to get ideas, and once you get a thumbnail you're happy with, you can start sketching out your design. My old design had some good ideas, and I felt like it was a pretty grounded design. I more or less drew realistic armor but added some fantasy flourishes and patterns on it. And that's not a bad thing at all. But this time around, I want to try something a little bit different, and I want to emphasize the ethereal and elegant nature of an angel. So I use thinner and pointier forms, and I try to make the armor look more fantastical, while still trying to keep her looking protected. I also go for an asymmetrical design to emphasize the feeling of dynamism, but mostly I do this because I think it might look cool. I wasn't quite sure whether to do line art or painting for this character design, but in the end I went with line work because I wanted to make it more similar to my old design. So when I put them side by side, I could compare them more directly. So here are some quick tips for keeping your character design interesting and appealing. Number 1, big, medium, small. You want to vary up the sizes you use to keep things interesting. This applies for a lot of different things, but in my case, I make sure that all the wings on this character are different sizes. Number 2, use repeating shapes and forms to make your design more cohesive. In my design, I use a lot of wing shapes and scroll work to give it that grandiose, angelic feeling. And number 3, you did a lot of research, so try to make sure that each of your elements is there for a reason. It's fine to not make things completely realistic all the time, but you want them to at least make sense in the context of your universe. Okay, so after cleaning up and rendering the character, this is how it... Hang on. Wait, I kinda don't really like how it looks. I don't know about you, but sometimes I just finish a picture and I'm just not happy with how it looks. I feel like this gold scroll work here is just so busy and way too noisy. And these values just aren't grouped very well, but separated into these awkward chunks. I liked how it looked as a sketch way better. To be honest, I think it was kind of a mistake to use a line art focus style for this design, with all these intricate shapes and gold patterns. I'm not skilled enough to pull it off. So I went in again and tried to simplify and clean up the gold bits and refine the shapes just a little, and after those corrections, here's how it looks. To be honest, I'm still not that happy with it, but I think I definitely at least got better over the last 3 years. Maybe I'll be able to make a design I'm actually happy with in another 3 years. I have a really long way to go, and I still have so much to learn, so I'll keep working hard. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, add the subscribe button to your visual library. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. So let's start. I said the word so. I'm going to go to sleep.